Hello, and welcome to the Game Audio Hour, a fortnightly podcast where we discuss all things game audio from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And it's a new year. Yeah! It's episode 200. Yeah! Woo! Woo! And it's a very special episode because we've got a special guest here. You can see him there on the bottom center with that Game Audio Hour crown over his head. We'll get to him, but first let's go to our regular panelists here. Let's start with Chase. How are you doing? Wow, you already got the bubbly here, huh? It's still the middle of the day.
Hey, you know what? It's 200. You got to celebrate with some water and some fancy glass any time of the day.
Oh, man.
Cheers.
Cheers. Happy New Year to that. Fine water there. Alex, what's your preferred brand of water there?
I don't have any water. I've got one of these. Can I drink that? This kind of looks like a cup, doesn't it? It's a DI box.
Oh, man.
Carl knows.
Input, not output.
Yes, it's a type A5. Carl knows this. There we go. I'm good, thanks.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Mike, how are you doing? What's your beverage of choice?
My beverage of choice is Yorkshire tea, high caffeine, the chemical opposite of whatever Chase is drinking right now. But it does the trick and keeps me going throughout the day, especially when it's cold.
Excellent on this.
Yorkshire tea is great. Good choice.
When it's cold. Cold SoCal afternoon, huh?
I believe, well, like by LA standards, I mean, below 65. That's a little chilly for me at this point.
It's -2 here, so that's 2 degrees below freezing, whatever freezing is in Fahrenheit.
Oh, no. No, it can't be freezing over there. It's certainly not freezing in this room because we've got a hot guest here in the form of our esteemed colleague, founder of Game Audio Hour and host emeritus, Kyle Johnson. Kyle, how are you doing?
Hey, this sounds like the best intro I've ever had, and I have to give you guys a lot of money. Sell some stuff, find some cash.
Oh,
my drink of choice is, are we sponsoring waters?
Oh, there we go.
It's called Square Water, artesian Square Water, no Fiji. You don't get any. Oh, wait, I blew it. I just said Fiji. That's my drink of choice, which, by the way, during the season, it's typically eggnog. So I'm doing pretty good. I would like you to know that I have drank my last carton of eggnog for the next 360 days, and I'm a little sad about it.
That's okay. You could always make your own eggnog. And also, it's totally cool to have the artesian water because you're reasonably close to Artesia, California, so it's A-okay in my book.
I thought you were going to say I was artesian, but that's all right. I'll take location.
Oh, man. No, it's I'm really glad that you're here. I'm really glad that the whole crew here is here and ready to start off a fantastic new year of 2021. In doing so,
look at you guys. That's awesome.
I kind of want to talk a little bit about the very beginnings of Game Audio Hour because, hey, you're on this show. And you haven't been here in a while, but we would be remiss if we didn't say, really, you kicked this whole thing off. You really started this, and kicked our bums into gear through the beginning of the show. And if it wasn't for that, we certainly wouldn't have gotten to episode 200. So, Kyle, tell us a little bit more about that.
I want to say, you guys have kept this place looking spiffy. It looks fantastic. We're at 200 because of all the hard work you all have done. I just asked my friends if they wanted to hang out and watch me drink scotch. That's pretty much how this whole thing started. And now look, now you're like all grown up. That's so awesome. How did it start? Is that what you were asking? Well, we all kind of knew each other in some form or the other. And then I started thinking about putting together an internet show for composers, really. Mostly so I could learn from all of you kind of illegally, illicitly maybe is a better word, because You would say, "Oh yeah, when I do this thing, I always, mix 2 violins," and then I was off to the side building an orchestra, 2 violins, not telling you, and also not sending you any paychecks. But now the cat's out of the bag. Maybe I should do something about that. But yeah, that was basically it. I just wanted to talk to people who knew way more about this than I did, and do, and had so much more talent than me. And then I wanted to spread it out, like have some people who are in this genre and that genre, and kind of cobble together. So we had, you guys remember Jack Minhorn? He was one of the early guys, and he was doing a lot of sound effects, sound design stuff as well. Which of course, if you're going to do game audio, you can't just do composition. Alex was in Japan at the time, so he had that touch that was going on, what was going on in the scene over there. We had Mike, of course, and Vince. Mike and I have been, man, how long have we known each other, Mike? It's been forever.
I feel like it's been a decade.
It's been a while. And then Vince wrote one of my favorite game soundtracks of all time, and I tried to emulate it with computers and failed miserably. So then I became friends with him and said, if you can't beat him, join him, right?
Oh man, it was.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that, and it was.
Oh.
Also I also remember at that time, it's not just a matter of me responding to that email. It's like, that game company and Sony owns all that stuff, so like that response had to be, company line and whatnot. I mean.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you, it was I joke because I have that sense of humor, that sardonic sense of humor, but. Flower was just so amazing to me that I spent hours trying to make that soundtrack, either through my own skill or through programming a computer to try to pick up parts of it. And then when I realized that, hey, I can't even come close, but I can at least mock it a little bit. And then, I don't know if you guys ever knew the story, but I wrote this piece, and then I took my game engine and I attached it to the Flower engine with no sound. And basically was just trying to say, does this sound like Vince? And I sent it to that game company going, what does Vince think of this? And they wrote me back and they said, we love Vince. Don't do that. I said, okay. And that's how that happened. They're like, don't do that, Kyle. Stop. And I was not even close. So they were being very kind to me. But anyway, that's how I reached out to Vince. I was like, I got to ask this guy who writes this amazing music also if he'll join this menagerie. And so we had Jack, and we had Matt, and we had Mike. Sorry, why did I say Matt? Sorry, Jack, Matt.
Close enough.
Jack, Mike, and Vince. And then we got Alex in there, and we got Chase came along. Chase was watching the show and then offering all these amazing ideas in the chats. Just leaning on him for his independence because he was doing a lot of independent stuff. And we were like, well, we're working at bigger game companies and kind of tied to their furniture, which doesn't necessarily have a lot of that creative freedom that you have when you're independent. Of course, Alex was independent. So that's how it all came together. Mm-hmm. In my long-winded way.
Beautiful. I think that's one of the things that really defined Game Audio Hour, especially when I joined it, I realized very quickly was very different and wonderful. Just was the diversity, because still now as well, but in those days as well, we had you, Mike, and Vince and myself, because I joined Jack. I knew Jack through some other people, and then he introduced me, said, hey, you want to come on this show that I'm part of, because they may be interested to hear you talk about, tracker stuff and the legacy of tracker music in game audio.
Right, that was the beginning. Tracker, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the first episode I was on was just basically all about tracker music. What is it? Why is it important? How do you do it? Who even does it anymore? That kind of stuff. And then you ended the show by saying, hey, Alex, do you want to be a regular? This was really interesting. And I was like, this is great because we're all so different, that not only the styles of music that we do are different, but also the sort of the sector of the industry that we're working is also slightly different. Mike, at that stage, Mike was a pretty much the same as Mike, the same position that Mike is at the moment, just like a true freelance orchestral composer for games and film and media. And Vince, of course, was working at that game company. I don't remember exactly what I was doing. I think I was working for Winning Blimp at that stage. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So working for a very, very small indie company. And Carl, you had the studio there, and of course the work that you were doing in game audio and also outside audio in other audio fields as well. So it sort of came together in the middle with this common love of the gear and the technique and of games and, media and things like that. All these diverse sort of cultural, musical, and professional backgrounds coming together. And I think that was one of in the early days of game audio, that right from the outset defined, okay, this is what makes us very interesting and different. And yeah, I mean, of course, as you would see now as well, people who watch the show regularly will, of course, hopefully attest that we've still managed to keep that diversity of background and style and technical approach and, genre approach, etc. So yeah, there's your initial sort of, when you said that you wanted to sort of broaden it out a little bit, I think that was a fantastic decision, which really created something special.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'll tell you, there was, it's come so long that since we've all been together, and I'm thinking about all of our careers and how they've changed over the time. But what's interesting, as you mentioned that, Alex, is everybody has stayed within kind of an area that is their strength, like, I know I've tried to venture out and then, come back. Like, don't go over there, Kyle. But what's amazing is that here we are all these years later, and it's proof to the people who are getting into game audio that if you really focus on what you're good at,
it's true. When you think about it, yeah, I mean, we all basically are kind of working the same way that we were 6 years ago when all of this began. Of course, faster, more efficiently, better, but basically the same kind of styles and the same focus.
and
That's
6
certainly
years.
true.
6 years.
Yeah.
Each of us have a career in games for longer than 6 years, but man, 6 years is a long time in the game industry.
It is.
So, and this show on YouTube, can you believe it? 6 years later.
It's probably
so actually-
200.
That's
proper
right.
time to mention that I'm starting dental school next week, but have a good time.
I'll be your first client.
Okay, I was going to bring that up after the show. Thanks.
Yeah. So everybody send an email to Mike the dentist.
Mad Dentist Mike. Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Ooh.
I expect we're going to expand the show's scope a little bit. Game audio and the newest anesthesia and tooth decay prevention. We can maybe go half and half.
Oh,
I don't
man.
know, we'll work something out.
According to the last cue that I composed, it was practically anesthesia because I heard basically it sucks and we all fell asleep. So I can handle that part.
Well, we could do some really sort of smooth. Oh, I got it. It should be called transcendental.
Oh, jeez.
It's
Yeah,
kind of
my
my
show
today.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Shop of Horrors at this point.
No, I'm sorry. It must be because Kyle's here. The presence it's expanding the puns.
Don't
The
blame me.
puns are-
Don't blame me, Vince. You're on your own. Don't bring me in here and then throw me under a bus. I had nothing to do with that joke. I moaned like the rest of us.
All right, okay, I'll own that one. And on that note, let's actually go into our topic because we kind of introduced this during episode 199 at the end of the year. This idea of digital fusion. And if you weren't there for episode 199, let me just do a quick recap. Basically, there were a couple of composers that were talking about this idea of digital fusion, this new genre. There were a couple of people that referred to it as a genre for 2020. There were a couple of individuals that were talking about it specifically. Ivy and Slash, who are two of the composers from the Steven Universe world, if you are familiar with that series. And also this Discord that was linked to, the Major 7th Discord, and a lot of composers from that place talking about digital fusion. Digital fusion is, according to this Spotify playlist, music that combines elements of various genres, for example, jazz, classical, prog, with elements of computer music, for example, video game music, demo scene, and keyboard demos. And this thing has been expanded on in a couple of other places. Ivy, in a tweet earlier, said digital fusion sometimes contains virtual improvisation, The use of musical vernacular associated with improvisation, applying musical knowledge non-compositionally to surprise and create on the fly, but with the added tool of virtualization, i.e., a computer. And we linked to this Digital Fusion playlist, and I thought it would be interesting if we could listen to it over the break and talk about it. Maybe we could talk about the music itself, or about just this idea of what is this genre, digital fusion, because a lot of video game composers actually ascribe that genre to themselves, but do we ascribe that to ourselves as composers? I'm just going to throw that out there to the group. First of all, did anyone listen to this playlist and think, oh man, this music's hot?
I was pretty entertained by it. I thought that there wasn't a lot that was strikingly new, but there was a playful quality to the textures and the use of electronics that often would throw textures in interesting directions. There's a lot of rhythmic complexity, integration of sometimes sound bites from pop-ish music and quotes from kind of 8-bit video game sound effects sometimes. I thought it was a lot. I thought it was fun. It didn't strike me as anything that we haven't heard. I feel like maybe there's just a name given to some practices that we're very familiar with, particularly in mobile gaming and indie gaming. But I enjoyed it. It's cool.
It's cool. What about you, Chase? Because you're nodding your head there.
Yeah, I mean, I gave it a very brief listen in terms of just what it really was. I'm not a fan of marginalization with terminology of genre anymore. I don't believe that it's necessary to categorize that type of music in that regard, because as artists, we're already type of pigeonholed in the style that you want to create, and in that respect anyway, if you think about what clients and such. For purposes of streaming platforms to identify the sound you want to do, I think needs to happen in a reorganization of the myriad of genres we already have. But creating something completely new and then saying that this is that and this is that, I strongly feel mostly we probably should be breaking away from just generalizing and categorizing such, because we've been doing this for hundreds of years. Will that cause a little bit of chaos? Sure, that's fine. Welcome to 2021. Let's do something different.
Well, Chase, wouldn't you say that sometimes genre labels are useful in communicating with clients? If you need to pitch an idea for a score before you've been brought aboard the project and they want to have a sense of what you're thinking, isn't it useful to have a couple of labels just to grab and to establish a first order sense of what a future to be written score might sound like?
I think that our sound needs to be our names. I think that's where we should go. I do recall a John Williams and Steven Spielberg video of him playing on the piano. And he didn't say, this is what the sound is. It's jazz on the piano with orchestra. He said, this is going to work to this scene. Ba-da-da-bum-bum-bum-bum. And Steven's like, yeah, I love it. And that was John Williams' sound. I think that's what, as artists, we need to be respected for specifically. Therefore, we have creative freedom to pull any genre of what classifies was before, but it's respective of our own character for specific clients to come to us for to be hired.
True. That answer sounds a lot smarter than a lot of the people who might be doing the hiring. So I'm just thinking in practical terms, sometimes before you sit down, maybe it's a new collaborator, someone hasn't worked with you. I would feel a little at sea if I couldn't refer them to some terminology just so they understood that I was sane and I understood the basic musical needs and traditions behind a certain game. And then once I'm aboard the project, then of course you have a lot of creative freedom and you can draw from different elements. But I just wonder if there isn't some value in these labels.
Well, there's nothing wrong with communicating and educating our clients. There's nothing wrong with using the practical words that we obviously use to describe many other things, to persuade or trying to convince and even massage the feeling of whatever mood we're trying to convey towards such project. Really, the sound needs to speak for ourselves instead of the words.
Yeah, but I think.
Yeah, go
Go
for it,
ahead, Vince.
Alex.
No, you go. It's all right. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, I did have a gut thought there that I'm not sure if, as the client, that I would be in a position to look for learning and education at that point. And I actually wanted to point to Alex because you have been in both sides of that relationship there, where, you obviously you've done sound and music for different people, but also now you're looking for different sounds and music. And what exactly are you looking for, and how exactly do you approach that relationship?
I think it all comes down to the specific musical sensitivity of the client themselves, whether or not you can be talking genres or whether it's faster and more efficient just to play examples and reference tracks, because you will get some, various clients who have no need to really be worrying about the deeper textural, timbral sensibilities of any kind of music. Basically, I just want something that sounds rock. Give me rock, man. And of course, we know on our side of the table that rock music is a massive thing, and it's so hard to just say rock music and then understand what that actually means. But back on the other side, we mustn't forget that, for a large and significant and important majority of people, all of these things kind of get combined into this one big thing that is techno, or that is, classical, or that is rock music. These big sort of labels are what people just feel comfortable with in helping them sort of piece apart this complex world of music that they don't and probably shouldn't need to necessarily understand when it's a business negotiation. So I think that there's that situation where you have that. On the other hand, as Chase said, if you're a vendor as a game audio composer and you sense, okay, this client knows what they're talking about. They love music themselves. They've talked a lot about the kind of music that they like. I could say shoegaze, or I could play a track of music, a reference track by a shoegaze band, for example, and they would pick up on the nuances of how that is different from just saying, shall we have a soundtrack that is rock music? So I think it all depends on the specific musical sensitivity of the person that you're talking to. So therefore, I actually agree with both Chase and Mike. Not that you guys were specifically disagreeing, but I think that there's definitely a place for genre labels for certain people that you're talking to. And as Chase said, there's definitely a place for abandoning that entirely to prevent yourself from getting locked into certain sort of styles and expectations. And I think my feeling about the Digital Fusion playlist, which I had a quick listen to before the show tonight, I have complex views. So first, let's go to Kyle. Not used to saying that anymore. Jeez. Let's go to Kyle.
That's weird. Let's throw it to Kyle. Actually, I don't think I've ever said that before, even when hosting the show. Let's throw it to me. Everybody. This is what I have to say. It's funny because in the time that I've been away, my career has changed slightly. And because of that, labels have become extremely important to me. So I definitely think that once established, you lean on familiar names that people are going to be able to turn out a certain sound. And John Williams being one of those exceptions that, he could do a sci-fi or he could do a document or a drama and he's still going to sound good. There's some people who really tie into certain, I might even say Hans Zimmer, which I hope my phone doesn't ring. Actually, it would be cool if Hans Zimmer called me. Please, Hans Zimmer, call me and say I'm wrong. That's not going to happen, by the way. Don't wait. I'm not going to hold my phone up to the camera. It's not going to happen. But, there's some people who just can do certain things and some people can do a lot of wide things. And when it comes to games, one thing that's really exciting for me is that I don't see a lot of the same names landing for more than 2 games. We've got some really close friends of the show who are well known the way they write. And they've got series that are tied to them. And then the one thing that the game industry does is, as sad as it kind of can be for those friends, is they'll start looking at other composers and say, what is somebody else doing? which is really, really good. Because I think movies are just they tie. It's kind of like, I think about movies too, you've got directors and you've got composers, and they're just always matched up. And it's similar to, you've got a lead guitarist and a singer. It's always going to be those two, and you go down, you can say it's, whoever, the Rolling Stones to Guns N' Roses, it's just always going to be this combination of like guitarist and singer. And that happens a lot in movies, but it doesn't happen a lot in games. So you'll get a couple of contracts for a little while. And because of that, it's important to establish yourself when you hit the mark, when you get that contract, is establish yourself and what you have as a sound for sure, so that people can reference it. But it's also equally important in the game industry to grow beyond what your ability is. Recently, I've sold a couple of songs, and one of them was a country song. And I don't write country music. I just had this song stuck in me, and it sold. And had I limited myself to say, I don't know, it's country, I don't really like country, or something like that, and talk myself out of it, I would have missed this opportunity. But that takes me right back to genres or categories, which is specific. I had to, like this song, I had to say, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and to attract people to it. Because they weren't going to look, if I would have just said, it's just country, I would have lost all kinds of people. But it's also a little folky, and it's a little dark. It's got some sadness to it, and then you start adding these categories, and it does describe the song, but it doesn't describe who I am. It was just a one time that I wrote something like that. So it's important to use these categories to promote your ability and to grow your ability so that you can be useful beyond the first couple of contracts that you get.
Mm.
My opinion, 2 cents.
That's go ahead, Mike.
I've got a follow-up question for Kyle, which I'll time so that he's not drinking in the middle of my question. So you Kyle, you're doing a scoring project right now, and I'll leave the details oblique so I'm not spilling any beans. But when you pitched this project, did you find that did you have a stylistic reference that you used? Did you say, like, I was thinking of doing it in this particular style? And did that help you land the gig?
Well, that relates right back to Alex May. Alex May is purely the reason that I attacked this gig. I heard about it, and they were starting to put Temp together, and a friend of mine recommended that I compose as an early guy. It's a sci-fi feature that is NDA'd right now, and I have to be honorable. And so, when I heard that they were getting started early, I didn't have to make references because I luckily had somebody who was telling me, you got to listen to this guy's stuff. And they asked for some of my things, and I sent them some sketches. But more than that, I sent them brand new stuff off of their description of what they wanted the movie to be about. I just sat at the piano and just thought, what would that sound like to me? I think that was more powerful than having something in the past, because that's tied to other things that may not represent what I think they want. So, of course, having the conversation, having somebody to represent you, and then coming up with something new, and a lot of it was kind of like, if I get it, I get it. If I don't, I don't. If I tie too much hope to it, then I'm going to not do a good job. We're not ready for music yet. And this is where Alex May came in. I said, well, if you guys are doing storyboards, I have an idea. Something that's happening in the game industry is that people are getting started early, not using temp, and they're having the music from the composer be used while they're doing the storyboards. There's a lot of back and forth conversations. And as they edit the storyboard and change the scene or whatever, I can actually in time change the music to match that. So if they love the theme, but then they go, you know what, we don't want any space race cars in there now. We're going to just put, space elephants walking across the plains. It would be completely different, but they might say, I still like that theme you had. When you get to the end, you already know what you're writing for because these decisions have been made. But at the beginning, when you change those things, you're also, as we all know, you're writing, when we write cues, there's themes that we repeat on different instruments or in different motifs or different ways. And so the stuff that changes can get thrown away, but it doesn't really get thrown away because you can reference it later and say, that piece we threw away with the space race cars, how about we do that for this, chase scene later? And they go, oh, you already wrote it. We love that piece, So, Mike, I guess I answered your question in a very long way. It helped me that somebody represented me. It helped me that I got talking to them early. It helped me that I made sketches upon our conversations. That's, I think, how I got the gig.
Man,
I
that's so
think
cool.
this falls into Team Chase's side of the label value debate, because here Kyle was simply providing like kind of direct expression, like his own take without reference to any particular style, and they liked that sound.
Yeah, I think that that's quite a luxury to be in that position, to be honest. Like especially like from my point of view as a contractor of game audio people, you rarely have the time or the budget, or to sort of go through. It does become a very fast, compact conversation, and with certain people on the other side of the table, it can be very, very convenient just to drop a few genre labels depending on their sort of knowledge of music. If you do have the luxury to do it as Kyle did it, where you can actually sketch something entirely fresh for them, which is that's obviously always going to be better than just saying, oh, we're going to make it country with a touch of folk.
Yeah. Another thing to hit on too is that there's outside of games and movies, and it's probably used by people in games who are doing placement, but they have this thing called music placement, as you guys all know. People listening might not know. And there are teams of people who are dedicated to finding the right rock song for that love scene, So they spend their life listening to a lot of different music, and they take in a lot of different suggestions from friends. But in the end, I was talking to a guy who does that, and he handed me a piece of paper, and that paper was nothing but categories. It was just descriptors. So it had this kind of grid that said sad love scene, and then it went across, and it was like rap, or it was, and I was like, what, or Motown, R&B, or something like, this is weird, and then another category would say shoegaze, but only if it was by, My Bloody Valentine or something. It's like it was so specific. He had these scenes and then had these descriptors, and I'm not even doing a good job because some of it was, just descriptors, just categories, somewhat bands, but mostly it was just genres and categories. And of course, I'm an old dude. I can remember back to the record stores. Thank God they had some of those categories. Sorry, Chase, I'm taking your argument apart, man. I don't mean to. I agree with you in many ways. But now I'm grateful because if you go to a record store, I've got these placards I got to flip through, and I don't want to be starting in like, opera looking for the next Yes record. I want to figure out where the hell that Yes record is. But it's all part of it, isn't it? I mean, we categorize because as humans, it's what we do. We like patterns, and we like to have everything fit into these nice little shoeboxes. And it is not a great representation of somebody's talent because if you say, this person's really good at chase scenes, and I'm just going to keep going down. Ironically, Chase, let's go with something different since Chase brought it up. But I'm talking too much. Goodbye. See you in a year.
No, not at all. Honestly, I think that's great. I think there were some really... there are just some great examples there. I definitely see parallels in really the projects that I've been doing where, I feel like it's been the most successful relationships and collaborations. Hey, what am I doing? I'm basically temping myself and being able to establish and explore along with everyone. And it's such a great feeling doing that. And also going back to the whole genre talk, going all the way back to that whole thing of digital fusion, I think it maybe struck me quite a bit because I realized that, one, I wasn't able to categorize myself as this digital fusion thing that was just being put out there on the ether. But also, two, I really wanted to back in the day, in the early and mid 2000s. It was like, oh God, all this stuff that's happening here really does feel like me right now. And I think this also connects to how I've been trying to establish my communication for this coming year. One of the things that I was doing last year was setting up a half decent looking website where I try to succinctly and cleanly communicate who it is that I am, because they're going to probably read this sentence above my Real Crafter list of music links before they actually click on the links, and what am I? I'm not Digital Fusion. I've got this sentence here on my website. Vincent Sound draws an equal measure from the concert art music world, modern jazz, and the ever-growing legacy of video game music making around the world. Which I think is okay. It's not bad.
That's accurate, yeah.
That's really good. The whole the Digital Fusion discussion, just coming back to that, I feel very complicated about that. It feels to me, I hope I don't offend anybody with what I'm about to say, but it feels to me to be sort of weirdly and a little needlessly meta. Because I think to say, I don't know, to say that you compose video game music means something that is probably more useful to you in your career than saying you compose digital fusion music. By the way, if you want to know what digital fusion music is, it is music that combines blah, 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 and then that description. Just because I think that, especially from the point of view of a career, building a career, despite what we said at the start of the show, that we try to deviate from our comfort zone musically. We try to. This is the kind. If you took our setup and just said, right, Kyle, go. You have 1 hour to make a piece of music. Mike, you have 1 hour to make a piece of music. Chase, Vince, go for it. 1 hour. Just do it. Don't think. Just go for it. We'll tend to come up with sort of something that sounds a lot like us, right, as individuals, because we have our styles. But as part of our career, in order to get more work, in order to be appealing to a variety of different games and a variety of different game genres, it's always to our credit to be able to kind of try to diversify a little bit, sort of, to try and make something like, for example, me, rather than just asking Mike to do my orchestral work for me, like I normally do, try and do it myself, or like, no, not a good idea. But it's always in our benefit to sort of try and show that we can be versatile. That if you hire me and we find out that your game does not need, retro electronica or whatever it is that I do, then I can still be of service to you. You don't have to go and contact, Michael Shapiro. I can do it for you. Oh, by the way, you can contact Michael Shapiro because he's cool, but you don't have to contact anybody else because I can do it for you, right? So it's in our best interest to show that we have some degree of flexibility, even though we know that at the end of the whole process, probably what we're going to end up making is going to sound undeniably like us in our comfort sort of zones anyway. So with that in mind, to have this kind of genre-defining video game music or a certain style of video game music called digital fusion, firstly, I think that's a little bit sad for the art of music in video games. If now we could say, I want a soundtrack that is in the style of digital fusion. Give me digital fusion. If everybody was wanting digital fusion, something that Kyle always used to say on the show was that we need to stretch it out. Like we cannot have always, epic orchestral music to the Call of Duty, or heavy metal music to the Doom, or techno to the sci-fi shooter. We cannot always have this, because how are we benefiting from that as an art form? We're just kind of sticking in the comfort zone. This genre of game should be tied with this genre of music. They always go together. So now if we have this video game style of music called digital fusion, some of the other descriptors that they used, especially Roland Integra Prog, it's fantastic. Or club. Specific. Yes, club music made on a tracker. I have strong issues with that one, but anyway, that's a different topic of discussion. I think that in the interest of sort of pushing our art form in making music for games out sideways, so that you really can show somebody, wow, we can have this science fiction game with a soundtrack that you would never expect would fit with a science fiction game. In order to actually do that, I think this is where Chase's argument comes in. It's important to be able to gain some independence from, these labels that we're using. Therefore, I don't know that a term digital fusion to define this sort of classic, what a lot of video game soundtrack, sort of classic video game soundtrack sound. I'm not sure that really benefits our art form very much. What do you think?
You brought something to mind for me, Alex. the people that make these decisions, as we've already just said here, are limiting. I think Mike brought it up. It's like they're limited to moving fast and being very specific. And also, when you have that kind of heavy metal soundtrack to Doom, there's a certain number of sales that you know you're going to get. At least certain sales you're not going to lose by changing it too much. And so if somebody has that vision to change the music for the genre or for the type of game, that's really great. So that's a fight that's happening internally that you have nothing to do with, and you're hoping somebody's pulling for that. But where I think we could be effective in that way is through our networking. It's so important to go out and meet not necessarily other composers, which people have a tendency to do, but go to a party where all the directors are going, or all the producers are going, or some of the artists are going, and start talking to them about the ideas that you have for the things that they do. I think that's extremely important. So in some ways, the higher ups are going to look at these categories and these labels, and they're going to say, I want digital fusion for this type of game. But when that starts getting passed around to who the composer is going to be, hopefully there's somebody through networking that's going to go, Alex, I was talking to Alex May. He's got some pretty cool ideas. Maybe we should just listen to him. Maybe we should just see. And then that's the way that gets converted, I think, is somebody sees the support that the development team has for a specific composer or different type of sound, and then they start to push that back up to the people who are just making quick decisions based on money and based on categories. What do you guys think?
Yeah, there's such a myriad of different situations when it comes to contracting for game music, though, really, isn't there? Like you do have the big boardroom, corporate, big budget level of things where the game director may not necessarily care at all about music, in which case you have those kinds of struggles, especially on the artistic side, dealing with people on the other side of the table, as I said, who aren't particularly musicologically inclined. But then also you have the same kind of conversation that can happen on a very, very small scale game where it's just like, 3 or 4 people, and it's less about the money and just the fact that nobody has time to really care about the music. Yeah, they love music, but nobody has the time there. Everybody's so under the press in just trying to, get the game going, as often the case with indie operations, that nobody really has time to delve into any level of musicological sophistication about the choice of genre. I think that the fight that we should all be pushing for at the end of the day is the one that Kyle always says is trying to show that, yes, you don't necessarily have to match this game genre with this music genre all the time, and let me prove to you why. If that is something that we all agree is always going to be important for game audio as an art form to be taken seriously, then the idea of a genre called digital fusion, maybe it's only coincidental that it happens to take a lot of reference from classic video game soundtracks, and maybe there is no relevance really for the process of creating game music with the genre digital fusion. Maybe they're totally different, but I don't really see how it helps us if we're trying to diversify and show that, this style of music can fit with this style of game in a way that you've never really anticipated could work before. I did want to ask one thing, Vince. I'm really curious about your opinion on this because you have a excellent pedigree in the history of game music. To what extent do you think game music has always tried to emulate other genres of music, but always been limited by the technical limitations, the hardware limitations, which has resulted in a certain sound? Like, I'm just thinking of, when I read that description, the one that I took offense to was club music made on a tracker, right? Because that's very interesting, because my background coming from like demo scene and Amiga tracker music and stuff like that, tracker music was never trying to sound like tracker music. Tracker music was always trying to sound like other things, but it was always held back by the fact that you've only got 4 channels to work with of, 21.18-bit sound. So that's your limitation. So the fact that you get to something that sounds like what we now call demo scene music or digital fusion is simply a result of the fact that tracker music was trying to do something else. It was trying to sound like new wave music at the time, or like Italo disco music at the time, or the jazz fusion stuff going on at the time as well. It was trying to sound like that in the 80s, but it couldn't do it. And it's sort of similar with some of the classic game soundtracks, like the chiptune soundtracks as well, especially the Japanese ones. They were trying to sound like things. So when you listen to them, hopefully you look beyond how it actually sounds, the actual timbres of it, which is limited by the hardware that it's playing on. Listening to an orchestra play the Final Fantasy theme or whatever, right? So Vince, to what extent do you think that video game music has always been trying to emulate something else? And if the answer to that is very often, then do we even really need a label like Digital Fusion when basically we're sort of always trying to emulate other things within the technical limitations of what we've got?
I mean, I do think that it's been impacted by that. Everything is trying to emulate something else. But I also think that those limitations are there 100% of the time as well. And it's really interesting just how much both of those things are fighting and impacting the sound of the actual music that results out of the composer, out of the game, out of the hardware. My gut tells me that it's really, as much as 100% of these people are trying to emulate these things, whether it be, Cassiopeia or the London Symphony Orchestra, or, I don't know, Dave Matthews Band. I remember listening to these 4-channel mods that were trying to be Dave Matthews Band. It's just really wacky, complete with the rock violin. As much as they want to do that, they are almost inevitably more influenced by the limitations that are stymieing them at every turn. And I think the thing that really is defining digital fusion is really those limitations. And I kind of wonder why they don't actually just wear that as a badge of honor. Hey, digital fusion is a genre that is born out of limitations and revels in them, and uses the influences of those limitations, even though we're not necessarily limited anymore. I mean, I'm kind of thinking about this Brian Eno quote. Yeah, and he talks about the things that are limiting. In this particular quote, he's talking about the limitations of the technology and quality. Let's see. Whatever you now find weird, ugly, uncomfortable, and nasty about a new medium will surely become its signature. CD distortion, the jitteriness of digital video, the crap sound of 8-bit. I think I'm to an extent influenced by limitations. I'm trying to do this thing constantly, fighting against the noise floor of 7-bit MIDI continuous controllers because I use a Wind controller. And, as cool as that thing is, I still have to deal with the fact that there's a lot of jitter at the low end of that because 7 bits results in 128 values, and it's hard to make 128 values sound smooth. That is that influence. That is something that I continue to do. And I'm looking forward to MIDI 2.0. Cool. But I constantly have this particular limitation in mind while I'm writing music. And I think it's similar to how, I don't know, like composers like Ivy and Slash, or some of the people that are on that Spotify playlist, guys like Jake Kaufman and Dale North and those guys, even though we are years removed from the limitations that existed back in the technology of the Super Nintendo, of the original Nintendo, or God forbid, the Atari 2600, those things still have an impact on how it is that they write music. And rather than trying to drift away from that and learn how we don't have those limitations anymore, they just settle into it and continue refining there. And I think that's actually really cool, though. Digital fusion, maybe not so useful as a genre category, but certainly useful when it comes to thinking about how it is that I, as in, I as the hypothetical composer out there, really am writing music. What do I do? What do I do to write music? How do I actually create? What impacting me? And I think that's really cool.
Cliffhanger.
I think that's really cool.
That's really cool. Sorry, Vince, you went out for a second.
Yeah, I saw that. It was like, oh, darn.
The limit. Do you think future podcasts will deliberately introduce like latency and gaps because they'll be emulating the classic style of podcast that was
Oh my
innovated
God.
during the days?
Have the dial-up sound.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that's interesting about digital fusion as a term is you can interpret it two ways. One, it can be this blending of different styles where you're drawing from pop music, sometimes through excerpts, sometimes like sound bites, and sometimes just through stylistic imitation. But it also could be considered to be the digital version of fusion, because fusion was a style of music that I think emerged in the 70s or 80s, and their formula was rock, which was the pop music of that time, plus jazz. So it gave rise to this hybrid music vocabulary that had a lot of the harmony of jazz, a lot of the extended tertian harmonies and those color chords, and some of the straight rhythmic impulse of rock. So I wonder if digital fusion is trying to say we're taking that concept and now adding to it the vocabulary of electronic timbres that you find in game music.
Yeah. When I first saw the reference to digital fusion when Vince suggested topic, the first thing I thought of was Chick Corea's Electric Band. Right? Because that is jazz fusion purely with the intent of making it sound as robotic and digital as possible, even though it's actually played by, fantastic musicians. And it's very human. The sound of it is very, very artificial. Yeah, I don't know. Fusion is a hard word, isn't it? I think because these days, actually, Lost Chocolate Lab he just dropped a Mahavishnu bomb in the Twitch chat. Yes.
Mahavishnu Orchestra, yeah.
Oh yes. Anyway,
we've missed a lot of these comments in the chat. Troy Snicks, not sure how to pronounce that. Talking about naming genres. I suspect that down the line they'll be naming genres classifications after people, and some people already saying that, referring specifically to composers. Like when I'm thinking about retro music, I like referring to specific composers there. Let's see, yeah, the whole jazz fusion. Oh, trois nix, like in French. Okay, un, deux, trois nix. Thank you for the comments. I see your Mahavishnu and raise you some brand X. Okay.
Let's see if he knows. That was me who wrote that. Let's see if he knows brand X.
Fane Stellaru mentioning Outer Wilds. I think, going back to sci-fi, Outer Wilds, fantastic game. Not the biggest game, but it certainly made a big impact last year. But yeah, Banjos in Space. It had a really cool sort of, I'm not sure, it was kind of like, Banjos in Space. It was a very indie rock sort of sensibility there, which was fantastic for the game. As much as it was a sci-fi game, it was also a very interesting puzzle exploration game, a very intimate type of exploration game that I thought the soundtrack suited very well. Oh man, Damien continuing on, Phil Collins, lol.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Phil Collins is originally he was a session drummer, and Brand X was the instrumental fusion band that he was in. Anyway.
Well, I think more than a session drummer, he was one of the major parts of Genesis when Genesis was good. Right, Mike Shapiro?
Oh, yeah, I'm torn between my love for the Peter Gabriel era and the Phil Collins era, but I'm aboard.
I have something I'm very proud to say on air, which I should have nothing to do with game audio, but my son, who is 11, his favorite band is Rush. His second favorite band is Yes. and his third favorite band is Pre-Invisible Touch Genesis.
Heck yeah, I agree.
What?
Pre-Invisible Touch. That was the end of it for
How
me.
old is your son?
He is 11.
Great taste. You've done a good job parenting.
I mean,
Yeah,
on one hand, I think, okay, that's pretty cool. On the other hand, are you really depriving him of like modern sensory, or are you just like really taking advantage of the fact that the world is as it is right now? So you can, okay, we're establishing this musical bubble for you now.
Don't worry. He's well into Toto as well, like early and later Toto as well. So he has some of the smooth, invisible touch sensibilities as well. Anyway, I'll let him know tomorrow that on air, in front of millions of viewers, I announced that he is a big fan of Rush. So
Excellent.
anyway,
I actually. Oh, what did I want to do? Well, actually, I wanted to say one thing here. I kind of wanted to go to Chase, actually, because I was looking around at our various websites and how we present ourselves. And I know that, you talk about your sound, but you don't actually, oopsie. Oh, my God.
I oopsie all the time.
Sorry. You don't actually describe your sound in words that much, or at least I haven't actually found that. But you've been doing
Correct.
such a great job actually recently with going on Twitch, going on different partners' Twitches, and actually talking about music and showing off the tracks that you're working on and how you're doing that. And I think that's really awesome. But I also wanted to see if you did have a particular way that you describe yourself. If someone asked you, hey, what is your sound? How would you describe it?
The sound of what I do is celestial. I'm not being egotistical. I really feel that a lot of the things that I'm experiencing is a bit from whatever I've dreamt of. I have a myriad of phone melodies that I pull from because I dream of melodies in the middle of the night and I have to wake up and I really don't get a lot of sleep that much, but they happen more and more as I've gotten older. And some of them I'm thinking like, oh, well, shit, like, damn, that was Mike Shapiro's thing I just listened to on Cue of the Week, or that was Kyle's Instagram video. That was awesome. But so some of them are, accepted through, certain things. But a lot of them, I would say, over the past decade have been a lot of melodies that have come through. And from scoring the game of Ground, I watched one player on the YouTube thing saying that he was playing. He's like, I'm trying to remember what this sounds like. And he was like 3-second pause and he couldn't describe it. I'm really hearing things from whatever ether, where higher being the space that it could typically be. But I feel that it is I hate seeing my name on the thing, but it is what I personify in here. It's my heart. It's my character. It's all my experiences. It's my brain. It's my ever learning. And so therefore, that's why I don't like the feeling of just generalizing what it can be. Sure, I can describe it to you if you want to understand it, but it's about listening. And that's the biggest point I was saying is we don't listen as much as we used to anymore. If we listen, we really can hear what that person is. It's that Alex, it's that Vince, it's that Mike, it's that Kyle sound that I'm attached to because of a human being that created it. It's your experience, it's your life. And that's why you never really could hear me talk about whatever it is, and I'm not trying to dance around it. It's just what I genuinely and passionately feel.
Mm-hmm. I really respect your courage to put yourself out in that way, because I imagine that for in some cases, if people don't have the time in the business context to understand who you are, that presenting yourself in that light would actually set you back. Because here is an orchestral composer, here's a rock music composer, here's a techno composer, and here's Chase. And oh, we need a techno soundtrack for our shooter game. We're not going to look at Chase because I don't know what that is.
Right.
So I think you have a lot of courage to put yourself out there. And I think ultimately you're going to get work that is far more easy and comfortable for you to do, because you don't have to try and be anybody else but yourself, because that's what they chose, because they actually listened to your stuff and chose you because of that. So I think whilst it may not bring, a waterfall of different opportunities with high frequency, the opportunities that do come to you are always going to fit with you much more comfortably. You're not going to have to try and be something that you're not, just simply because you have the courage to present yourself that way, rather than saying, I'm a digital fusion composer, or like, I'm a rock music composer, or whatever,
Right.
Yeah. So big props to you for having the courage to put yourself up like that.
Thank you.
Seconded. All right. It's been... Oh. What happened there? It's been an hour, and unfortunately it's not the game audio hour and a half. It is unfortunately just the game audio hour. So
That's my fault. Sorry about that.
no, it's great. It was great for you to join us on this special episode 200. And but wow, we could easily go back into this because there's so much there that I resonate with, Chase, and I think we could spin that off into another conversation as well. But unfortunately, we'll have to end there. To everyone that is listening and watching on Twitch and YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, this is the start of an excellent year of 2021 for all your game audio and music travails. If you want to keep on checking us out, you can follow us on Twitter. Check out our tweets over there, and we will keep you up to date on the shows. Wow, Twa says, I'm glad this is the first episode of this. I'll gladly hear more. Congratulations on 200 episodes. Oh, man, we are looking forward to episode 201, continuing this on. It's hard to believe that it's been 6 years of this. And, well, not quite. It will be 6 years towards the end of January. But, yeah, thank you very much for the congratulations, Twa, Marina. And, man, hold on. Before we end this episode, what are we listening to? We need to establish that. What are we listening to? What are we consuming right now? Chase, you're consuming water, but what are you playing game-wise? What are you listening to music-wise?
Darkstone, PlayStation 1.
Oh, yes, Darkstone, PlayStation 1. Still continuing on that path. Let's go around in counterclockwise order. Alex!
I am playing Cyberpunk 2077, and I am listening to Rush, because my son won't stop playing it. But that's fine, because Rush is good.
Kyle!
I have recently revisited Civilization because it's the greatest game of all time. Don't even argue with me. It's clearly the greatest game of all time.
There's a good argument. There is a good argument to be had there, so I'm not going to question it.
It's you go, I want to play a game for 10 minutes, just 10 minutes, and get in there, and 4 hours later you go, what the hell? Got things to do. So that has been really fun. And what I've been listening to a lot lately is 60s French pop music. Trying to stylistically change my left hand, basically, on a piano. And they did some really cool stuff back then. So that's
Very
me.
cool. Mike, how are you doing? What are you playing or listening to?
First of all, I just want to say, geez, Kyle, because you play a game that was released in the last 10 years. I mean, really. Anyway, I've been playing a lot of Civilization 5, and and I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between that and Tsushima. I've been doing some listening to large-scale minimalism. I always love going to John Adams and some of his colleagues. I was listening to a really interesting piece called The American Four Seasons by Philip Glass, where Philip Glass was doing kind of his own take on Vivaldi, which was more educational than fulfilling, but I really enjoyed the process of listening to that attempt. And of course, I was enjoying the Digital Fusion playlist that was the basis of this episode.
How about you, Vince?
Oh man, it's interesting you mentioned John Adams because I had actually somewhat recently listened to the Century Rolls Piano Concerto by John Adams, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm really reappreciating it. I had heard, I actually heard this at the Disney Concert Hall way back when, and I just sort of had a feeling of popping in that track again, and so I listened to that again. I thought, oh yeah, I like John Adams. I do like those minimalists. In terms of games, Puyo Puyo Tetris 2. I gotta play some puzzle games. I love me some puzzle games, and it's just fun and light. Kyle, you're talking about playing a game for 10 minutes at a time. I'm just thinking, okay, let me just pop in, play some Puyo Puyo. Couple of minutes, I'm done. Ugh, time to get back to work.
Did it last that long, or did it go longer?
When I'm on a roll, yeah, I can kick people's asses in like less than 30 seconds. It's pretty fun.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I could just do a game and then get back to work. And unfortunately, I got to do that now, and I assume that's going to be the same way for many of you fine folk. So, thank you again, listeners. Thank you again for listening and watching episode 200. Check us out on Twitter, and we will let you know when the next show is happening. Episode 201. Await that. We'll see you later. Bye.